The mouth, sometimes called the oral cavity, is the first organ in our digestive tract and helps us to complete both the first and the second stages of digestion, ingestion and digestion. Our lips, our incisors, and our pointy canine teeth are excellent for bringing food into the oral cavity, making it available for the next step in the process, mechanical digestion. The molars, the teeth in the back of the mouth, are largely responsible for this and grind the food into smaller chunks. Our mouth can also begin chemical digestion with the help of our salivary glands that exist in the back of our mouth and right below our tongue. They make saliva, and the saliva comes out of the salivary ducts shown right here. This saliva contains the first digestive enzyme of our digestive tract called salivary amylase, ending in ASE because it's an enzyme. This amylase breaks down some of the polysaccharides into monosaccharides. The saliva also allows us to lubricate that food so that our tongue can roll the food up into a ball called a bolus, perfect for swallowing, and push that bolus back towards the back of the mouth. The back of the mouth, called the pharynx, is a complex intersection where both air and food pass. I usually use its name as a memory trick in my own mind. Pharynx, f for food, air for air. So food and air go through the pharynx. But they don't go the same direction leaving. If the person is breathing, the air passes in through the pharynx and goes this way into an area called the larynx, eventually to go to the lungs. But if a person is swallowing, the food instead goes back into this tube right here called the esophagus. When swallowing, the pharynx must direct substances in the correct direction using a flap called the epiglottis, this right here. When breathing, the epiglottis stays up and allows air to pass from the pharynx into the larynx. But when swallowing, the epiglottis closes over the top of the larynx, directing the food back towards the esophagus. The top of the esophagus relaxes and allows the bolus of food through. Now, if somebody were to scare you suddenly when the food was right here in the back of your pharynx, just passing into the esophagus, the epiglottis might lift up for a moment, and some of the food might start going down the wrong pipe, so we say, into the larynx instead. And that would cause us to cough a lot. And if we couldn't cough enough to get the food out, we could even choke and die. So the job of the swallowing reflex, this series of events, is to make sure that the food goes into the esophagus where it belongs and not into the larynx where it could cause us to choke, never able to breathe again. Once that bolus makes it into the esophagus, it's smooth sailing, pushed downward towards the stomach like toothpaste from a tube. But there's nobody squeezing the tube needs to squeeze itself. And that's one of the remarkable things about the esophagus, is that it's lined with a kind of tissue called smooth muscle. Smooth muscle can contract in smooth waves, contracting and squeezing in just above the bolus, and relaxing right below the bolus, putting pressure on the top, which pushes the bolus downward. These waves of contractions are called peristalsis. And sometimes when you're swallowing a particularly big chunk of food, you can even feel the peristaltic wave contracting through your chest, pushing the food downward. Thanks to peristalsis, you can even eat while hanging upside down, and the esophagus will still push the food to your stomach, though of course it's a little bit more dangerous that way, so I wouldn't recommend it. Then the food is pushed from the esophagus into the stomach. The stomach also does peristalsis, that series of wave-like contractions. And when it does that, it creates very strange shapes. The walls can do this peristalsis with the help of very strong layers of muscle tissue. And when they contract, they can continue to grind the food up and perform mechanical digestion. Anything that you didn't adequately chew with your molars can get mashed to a pulp by this mechanical peristalsis in the stomach. But the stomach doesn't just perform mechanical digestion, it also performs chemical digestion. If you were to take a slice of the wall of the stomach and look at it up close, it would look something like this, with long pits with cells on the inside. The cells on the lining make two substances, which they secrete into the middle of the stomach. The first is called HCl, or hydrochloric acid. This hydrochloric acid kills any bacteria that's on the food and helps to denature any proteins inside the food, unwinding those complex shapes and making them more vulnerable to breakdown. It's able to do this, of course, because acids have a very low pH, and our stomach actually has a pH as low as 2. It would burn holes in our stomach were it not for the fact that the stomach makes mucus to coat the inner layers and also generates many new cells to replace the ones exposed to the acid that die. Gastric pit cells also secrete pepsin, one of the first enzymes ever to be discovered in the human body. It is not named with the ASE at the end of it like most enzymes because this one was discovered before that rule for naming was invented. But like any other digestive enzyme, it breaks down macromolecules. Specifically, pepsin breaks polypeptides into shorter polypeptides. So in this way, the stomach is also performing chemical digestion. But the digestive process is far from over. So far, we've only completed mechanical digestion and begun digesting 2 of the macromolecules. The rest of these processes occur in the remaining portions of the digestive tract.